everyone. So my name is Tara Lynn, and I am going to be your workshop instructor here. Um, we do have a few more people that registered, so they might show up as we get started. Um, I will go over some of the supplies and I'll talk a little bit about how to set up your template and things like that. But the first thing that we want to do before I get into anything is go ahead and paint our background. That way it has a minute or two to dry before we try to dot on it. So whatever surface you chose to use, I just have a little mini canvas here. And this is my sample. So we're going to be working from this design. I'm going to paint my background black, but you can choose whatever color you'd like for your background. All right, while everyone is working on their background, I'll go over everything. So as I mentioned, my name is Tara Lynn. Um, I have registration for this class through Michaels, and right now Michaels has their messaging system turned off. So I was not able to email you before class through the platform. What I like to do is email the recording afterwards. So if you would like a copy of that recording, I would like you to email me. My email is connect@taralynnpugh.com. I'll put it here in the chat box so you know how to spell it, but it's CONNECT at TARALYNNPUGH.com. And you can email me and just request the copy of the recording and I can get that to you. Michael's had some issue with spammers, and so they have completely turned off messaging on their platform. So that's my contact information if you have any questions after class or would like the recording. I teach dot mandalas. I have a group that I do dotting with 3 times a month, and it's one of my favorite things to do. I find it really relaxing. One of the things I recommend while you dot with me is just to use this as an opportunity to learn. Don't worry about perfection. If you try to be perfect, you will be disappointed. None of us are ever perfect. Even artists who do this for a living, not perfect. So as we work step by step, you will find every little imperfection. I promise you, you'll see it. Our brains are wired to work like that, but when you're finished, you're going to look at it as a complete piece and just trust the process. You'll get there at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my face off here because I'm distracting myself. So actually, I'm just going to go ahead and remove myself altogether. Okay. Sorry, if I leave my face on the screen, I keep looking at myself to make sure I'm not making goofy faces or anything like that. So as far as supplies go, we're going to need some paint. You're going to want a weld palette, just something with a little bit of depth that you can put your paint in and dip into. If you don't have anything like that, sometimes what I will do is I'll use the cap of my paint and just pour some paint in there. And then when I'm done, I just pour it back into the jar. So you can do that. It's a little messier, but that is an option. As far as paint colors go today, I am going to use a white pearl. You could always just use white. I've got a light blue and a dark blue, and a light purple and a dark purple. And as far as the colors go, they don't have to match exactly. They don't even have to be the same colors that I'm using. You can really use any colors. If you enjoy this design, enjoy this process, you can try it again later and change up the colors and the design will look totally different. So as your, hello, somebody new hopped on. What you want to do to get started, if you're just joining, is paint your surface. I painted mine black. That's going to be my background color. And we're just talking about some of the tools right now. So I've got my palette to dip my paint in, got my background color, white, light blue, light purple, dark purple. The surface, we can paint on all different things. So on my sample, this is just a thick wooden canvas. This one here was just a little cheap one I got at the dollar store. It came with a little stand. So this is what I'm dotting on tonight. But you could really dot on anything. You could dot on a flat panel canvas. You could dot on a rock. You could dot on, you know, a little jewelry box. Whatever you have, you can use for dotting. As far as your dotting tools go, this is what I will be using this evening. Now, I like to use the Michaels Craft Smart tool set. So if you have that, our colors will be the same, and it'll be really easy to follow. If not, what I'm going to encourage you to do is just choose the next closest size. Usually on the set of tools that you buy, it tells you what size everything is. So if you know one from another, that's awesome. But in my set, I have a 10 millimeter, or 12, 10, 8, and 6 millimeters. And I have 2 stylus tools. I have a green one that has a 3 millimeter and a 2.5 millimeter end. And I have a blue one that has a 1 and a 1.5 millimeter end. Basically what you want is some variation. Before dotting tools became a thing, and even now they're not really popular, people just dotted with what they had at home. So maybe, they use the end of a pencil or the end of a lipstick tube, or, different pens and markers have different ends. So that's what people used. My very first dotting tools was a set of crochet needles because they came in different sizes and they were easy to tell apart, and that's how I learned how to dot. So don't feel like you have to have exactly what I have. The idea here is we're creating a pattern, and you can create a pattern with the tools that you have. They don't have to be the same. So if you got tools on Amazon or got them somewhere else, they are probably similar in size. So just use what looks right in the moment. I'll tell you what size I'm using. If you have questions, let me know. Another tool that I like to use while dotting is a mechanical pencil. These leads are nice and tiny, and you can use them to kind of fix your dots or refine some things as well. The other tool that you might want to have, if you have a piece of chalk available or a sewing marking pencil, that would come in handy. I have a chalk pencil that I use. If not, you can just use a pencil. But what we're going to want to do is find the center of our square. And so I'm going to set this aside here. My canvas is a little wet, so I am going to cheat and I'm going to dry it real quick. All right, a real easy way to find your center if you're using a square is just to get a straight edge and draw lines corner to corner. I'm going to use my chalk because if I use my lead pencil, you're not going to be able to see it on camera. So this will be nice and vibrant. I also like using chalk because when we're finished, I can just wipe it away. So this is an easy way to find your center. And then once you have your center, I'm going to draw another set of lines, one right through the middle, top to bottom, and one right through the middle, left to right. And this is our grid that we're going to be working with. Now, if you have a circle, it'll be a little trickier. What I like to do when I am working with circles is I will cut out a piece of paper about the same size as the circle, fold it in half, and fold it in half again. Let me see if I can find I don't have paper at my desk, but I'll show you what I mean using a little note here. So if I have my circle, and mine's going to be wonky circle. So let's pretend this is the same size as my surface. I could fold it in half, fold it in half again, and then clip out that little center. And now you have the center of your circle. So if you have a circle-shaped background or surface that you're working with, that's a really easy way to find the center of your circle. So those are my little cheats there. Now let's talk about dots. There are a few different ways to use your dotting tools. The first is just making the general shape of a dot. And when you do that, when you dip your tool into some paint, you don't have to do anything right now. I'm just going to demonstrate. When you dip your tool into the paint, you're going to want the paint to go up over the edge of the tool. And you want your paint, when you dot, to make a nice little kiss on your paper. So let me see if I can demonstrate sideways. I kind of want it to touch and squish, and then I'm going to pull away, and it makes a nice little dot there. What I don't want to do is stamp. I don't really want the end of my tool to touch the canvas if at all possible. So I call that a kiss, and that is the easiest way that I find to make a nice consistent dot. The other way that we can make dots is what I call walking the dots, and with that you'll use a stylus. I call these rods. They're the same size on both ends, and these are styluses. They're different on each end, and they have the little ball at the tip. Same thing with the stylus. When you dip in your paint, you want the ball to come up over the paint to come up over the edge of that ball. And then you can just hold this like a pencil. You can make dots with these, but you can do also what they call walking the dots, which is not redipping each time, and the dots will get smaller. And you can walk those dots in a straight line, or you can walk them in a curve. So those are two different ways that you can make dots. We're going to use both of those on our pattern in different places today. So I'll talk a little more about that when we get there. All right, the first thing we need to do is our center dot. And so for that, I'm going to use, let's see, my pink rod, which is 10 millimeters. And I'm going to use my darker purple paint. When you dip in, you want your paint to go up over the edge of your rod. You want to have lots of paint on there. And you're gently going to tap it down in the center. Very light pressure. You don't want to use it like a stamp. You just barely want to give it a little kiss. And that's your center dot there. I'm going to figure out what the best way to organize my space is here. I think I'll work like this. All right, next what we're going to do is I'm going to add these small dots around my purple center. And I'm going to use light purple for this. I'm going to use my stylus tool. I've got a small end and a large end. Now this is the smaller of my two styluses. I'm working about 1 millimeter is what I'm aiming for. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to add 16 dots, but I'm going to start with the ones on the line first. So I'm going to dip and dot at my top. I call that my north. Dip and dot at my south. Dip and dot my east. Dip and dot my west. Then I'm going to do each one in between on those lines. Dipping and dotting each time. So each one of those lines, that gives me 8. Once we finish those 8, we're going to visually just add 1 dot in between each of those sections. Take your time with those. Make sure you dip before each one. And we will end up with 16 of those. I am going to go up 1 size. So for me, that is my green tool on the small end. And for this, I'm going to use dark blue. And now we have a kind of a grid to work with. So we've got these dots, and I'm going to add 1 dark blue dot in between, in the center of 2 of these purple dots. So I've got this space in between. I'm going to go outside that row just a little bit, and I'm going to add 1 dot in between each space. And I'm going to follow this all the way around. You will end up not putting dots on your line because we're working in the spaces in between. And we will end up with 16 of those as we work all the way around. All right, next I'm going to find the tiniest point that I have. So for me, that would be the small end of my blue stylus. If you have a pencil available, you could use a pencil tip. If you have a pin, you could use a pin. We're going to add some teeny tiny dots. And so we've got our center dot. Right now it's just dark purple. We'll come back with the top later. We've got our row of light purple. We got our row of dark blue. In between each of the dark blue, I'm going to add a tiny light blue dot. And you can kind of, there's two places you could put a dot. You can put it in between. I did not do that. You'll see on here, I kind of have it up in line with that circle. So wherever your first dot is, just try to keep that consistent all the way around. So in between each dark blue dot, I'm going to add a light blue dot, and I'm going to do that all the way around. Dip and dot each time. After you get all the way around, you'll have 16 of those. All right, next we are going to add some dark purple dots. So I've got my 6mm tool here. Just to give you an example of the size, it's the smallest of my rods. Some sets will have a clear rod that's 4mm. So this is just one step up from that if you've got one of those sets. It's okay if yours is not the exact same size as mine, just go with it. Here on my sample, you'll see in between this row of blue dots that we just did, there's a little space where there's some black. So I want to leave a little bit of room. I'm not going to have a huge gap, but just a little bit of room. And we're going to add 8 dots. So I'm going to add those on my cardinal points. I'm going to start at the top. Remember, when you dip into your paint, you want your paint up over the edge, and you're going to lightly kiss it onto your surface. So I like to do my top and bottom first. Right and left. And then I'll add one in between. So one on every line. We end up with 8 of those. Sorry if you hear slurping and crunching, that's my dog. Whenever I make art, he eats dinner. That's what he does. Right, so the next thing we're going to switch things up. We're going to walk the dots now. So around each one of these purple dots that we just made, I've got a line of dots that goes around each side, and that's called walking the dots. The first part of that, I'm going to use my 3mm tool, and I'm going to add my center dot. So for me, that's my larger stylus on the larger end. What you can do is look at your surface and kind of just judge how much room you have. If you need to go down a size, feel free to do that. But I'm going to add my center dot first. So it's going to be one dot right in the middle on each line on the outside. Dip and dot each time. We want all of these to be about the same size. And then I'm going to flip to the smaller end. And so for each line that we're going to make, I'm not going to dip and dot each time. I'm going to dip once and then I'm going to go around my circle. So however many you can fit, I just count 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can fit about 4. And when you don't dip each time, they get smaller. So I did my right side and made 4. Then I'm going to redip, oops, and drop my tool. Redip and do the left side. And I'm just going to count the same amount of dots. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I move on to my next circle. Redip, do one side, and then the other. So you redip before each side this time, but not before each dot. And then we just work our way around that circle. The next design element we're going to do is called a pin. And for that design, we're going to need the 8mm tool. So we used our 6mm tool for the purple dot. So it's one size up from that. And then I'm going to want a tiny stylus tip to pull the paint. And we're going to put these pins all the way around. They're going to go in between these purple dots. So visually, what you're looking for is right here in between. Okay. And we're going to make our pin about here. And we're going to pull it inward. And so I'll show you how I do that. So I'm going to use my 8mm tool, my dark blue paint. Again, we're going to dip before each dot. So I've got a nice bit of paint on there. I'm going to make my dot, leaving enough room that I've got space to pull it. So here's what I'm looking at there. I can dip my tool into a little bit of paint, and then I'm going to pull this pin inward, just using the tip of my stylus. So it kind of looks like a map pin. And so then I can make each one of these all the way around. I'm going to try to work in the same area of that, about halfway through, in between each circle. And then you pull it down. And we're going to repeat this pattern all the way around until we have 8 of those. For the next design element, what I'm going to use is my stylus. I'm going to use the larger of my two styluses, but the small end, the small side of my green stylus. And I'm going to pull a line of light blue on each side of the pin. And this is one of those things where in the beginning when I said everything does not have to be perfect, you probably didn't even notice in my design, like some of these go over my dots. It really is not perfection, but when you look at it, and when you have it on display, you really don't see that. So don't be hard on yourself if it's not too perfect. But what I do to make these lines is I'm going to dip my stylus in some paint, and then you just hold it like you would hold a pencil or a pen, and you pull. And it'll eventually, let me hold this up closer to the camera. It'll run out of paint kind of on its own. So that one was a little smaller. Let me show you with the dark color. So I am not adjusting the pressure at all. I'm just tapping it and pulling. So a lot of people try to vary the pressure and just kind of like lightly touch. I think that's harder. You just tap it on there and pull, just like if you were writing with a pencil. So if you want to try a few on a piece of paper, you can do that. But what I'm going to, my light blue paint is a little chunky here. I'm going to mix it so that I don't. So you just tap in your paint, and then we're going to add one on each side of that pin. And I'm just going to kind of nestle it in where the end of the circle and the pin starts. And I'm just going to tap and pull inward. And what I'll do is work my way around, and if any of those end up too short, I just use a pencil tip to kind of pull the paint where I need it to go. I'm going to continue using this blue rod, my 8mm, the same size as we used for our pins. I'm going to use dark purple paint, and I'm going to add one circle in between each of those blue pins. So that'll be on each line. Now we're working the design from the inside outwards, so I'm going to go not completely in another row, but just up slightly. We're going to put one of those on each line all the way around. So we'll end up with 8 of those. And then with the same size tool, I'm going to add a light blue dot next to each dark blue dot. So I'm going to give a little bit of space. I don't want to go too far out. But right next to the dark blue, we're going to add a light blue in between the purple next to the dark blue. Make sure you dip before each dot. Get a little tail with my paint here. If you ever have a boo-boo like that, sometimes I'll just use a Q-tip. Other times I might just let it dry and then add a little bit of that background color to hide it. So whatever's easiest. Right, I'm going to switch to my purple rod. This is 6 millimeters, so down one size from what we just did. And I'm going to use my light purple paint. And next to each purple, I am going to add a pin. So here's our purple and blue dots that we just did. Here's the row that we're on. I'm going to add a light purple pin. Now you're going to have to use your judgment as far as your spacing. So my spacing tonight is a little bigger than the spacing for this one. This is the farthest edge of our design, so you can just put it out kind of, if you're getting close to the edge like me. Just put it out there on the end. And then use your little stylus tip to bring that pin inward. We're going to add 8 of those. One on each line. Then just like we did with these blue pins, we added lines on each side. I'm going to do the same thing with these light purple pins. I'm going to add dark purple on each side, and I'm using my smaller of my 2 styluses, my blue stylus, on the large end. So that is about 1 millimeter dot. And so I'm going to do the same thing I did with those little pins, and I'm going to pull downward, 1 line on each side. Make sure for each line that you pull, you redip. For the next step, we are going to walk the dots around our light blue dots here. So I've got these light blues. It's going to be the exact same thing we did down here with the purple. So I'm going to get my green stylus, which is my larger of the 2. I'm going to use the large end, and my dark blue paint, and I'm going to add my center dot first, all the way around. So one dark blue dot in the center next to each light blue. And then once you have your center dots, you're going to flip to the smaller side. So I use my large end for my center, flip to the smaller side, and then we're going to walk the dots on each side. So I dip once and then count 1, 2, 3, 4. And I do dip again, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'll move to the next one, re-dip, and then 4 on each side. And we're going to work our way around the circle for each of those light blue dots, adding the dark blue around it. All right, for the next step, I'm going to add a little cheat. So grab your pencil or your chalk, whatever you use to make your marks. And what I'm going to do, we're going to add these little circles, these little dots kind of in between all the way around our edge. And so the way I did that is I added a little mark. I found the edge of the dark dots that we just did, and I just kind of drew a little circular line to help me visualize where my edge of the circle would be. And it doesn't need to be perfect because I'm going to wipe this off when we're done. So you can see this, you know, it's kind of a chunky circle, but it's a circle. But that just helps me visually see where I need to put those. And then for these dots, I used my green stylus on the large end, so 3mm dot, my dark purple paint. And then I added, visually what I'm looking to do is put it in between this line and this blue line here. So in between here, and then in between here. So it should go light blue, or light purple, dark blue, dark purple, light purple. And then we move on to the next section. And so it'll look a little goofy while you have your lines on there, but after you wipe them off, it won't look so bad. Now we've got one more layer that we're going to add, which is these white dots, and those are called top dots. And I am going to show you how to do those. I'm going to demonstrate. I think everybody is kind of working along with me, but I'm going to call a 5-minute break just so our paint can dry slightly before we add those top dots. If you need to grab a drink, go to the restroom, stretch your legs, go ahead and do that. And then I'll start here in about 5 minutes to do the top dots. All right, I'm going to start doing the top dots, and I feel like the top dots are really what make it look finished. And when I'm teaching, I like to say you can do whatever top dots you want. I'm going to do all mine with my pearl white, which has been sitting a while, so it's got a little film over the top of it. So I'm just going to pull that out of the way. For top dots, there's no rules, but you generally want your top dot to be smaller than the dot beneath it. And so for this center, we used our 10mm tool. So I'm going to go down to my 6mm tool, and I'm going to add a pearl white dot right on top in the center. Oops. Didn't quite have enough paint on that one. There we go. The next place that I put these white dots was on top of these purple right here. And these dots were 6mm. So I need to go down. So I'm going to use my stylus tool, and I'm going to use the 3mm end, the largest end of my dotting tool here. And I'm going to add one dot in the center of each of these circles. The next place that I had top dots is the dark purples. And for those, we use our 8mm rod to make those circles. So you could go down to your 6mm, or you could continue with your 3. Those are the two sizes I have. If you're lucky enough to have the clear rod that's in between these two, you could use that clear rod. That's totally up to you. But I'm going to start. I'm going to use my 6mm. And so these dark blue pins, right next to those is a light blue dot. They get one. And then the dark purple circle next to that gets one. So I'm just going to work my way around. The last thing that I like to do is get rid of those lines. Now, I recommend that you let your paint dry a few hours, if not overnight, and then you can use a wet paper towel If you're using chalk or even pencil lead, it should wipe away with a wet paper towel. I would not do it while you want to make sure your paint is not wet. But I just get rid of those that way. Another technique you can use that's a little more gentle if you're worried about pulling up that black paint is you can just get a paintbrush and a little bit of water if you use chalk and just kind of brush it away with some water. Again, wait till it's dry. I'm just demonstrating so you know what's up with that. And then when you've got all those removed, it'll end up looking like this. So go ahead and give that a sit, and then you can remove those lines. And then if you want to, I would love to get a class picture. You don't have to. If you don't want to participate, if you don't want to be on camera, that's fine. But I will pin everybody. Let me see. Pin. All right, so if you want to hold up your piece, turn on your camera, you can do that. Awesome. Stay there. Great. All right, I snapped a little picture. Ready that time. Okay, awesome. Well, if you don't have questions, I will turn off the recording here. Thank you for joining me.